Hello guys, it's CaffeBoy here and welcome back to another video. Finally, if you guys like tech stuff like me, Advanced Micro Devices is a company you have heard of many times, I'm sure. These days even more than in other decades. But why AMD is more popular today than before, and what made that happen? Well, let's find out. This is the history of AMD. Before we dive into AMD, I recommend watching the short video I did about Intel, AMD's competitor. It is short and there is only some basic stuff about the company, but it gives you a little taste about what we are going to talk about today. Let's start our journey with the year 1969, the year when AMD was founded. A group of engineers of the company called Fairchild Semiconductor created a new company called Advanced Micro Devices, or as we know, AMD. Actually, the first processors AMD made were actually just clones of Intel's 8086 and 8088 processors. But why? Because AMD was Intel's contract manufacturer back then. In the game, AMD's AM286 processor was part of that. It was basically Intel 8286, just with a better clock plate. And you know, Intel wasn't the biggest fan of that. We can see the taste of Intel's angriness by talking about AMD's AM3086 processor. AMD was ready to launch it in 1990, but due to Intel's litigation, the processor had to be released in 1991. I have to admit that AMD was a pretty dirty company back then. You know, it was again just a clone of Intel processor, this time Intel 8386. And best for all, it was cheaper. Yeah, you heard me right. After AMD's AM3086, Intel was just like, alright, it's over, and they started to be competitors. The same cloning continues for one more processor, AM46. Nothing special here, just a cheaper version of Intel's i4086. And after that, they made their first own processor called AM5X86, which sold well too. After AM5X86, K5 was released in 1995, and that one wasn't the most popular one. Somebody even thought that without AM5X86, AMD would have been posed a major threat to their financial situation because of K5's late release date. In 1997 they made K6, which was just an evolved version of K5. K6 got also some successors, K6-2 and K6-3. Those were all of the single ones made before the year 2000. Let's talk about their series and 2000 singles. Starting with AM2900, made in the 70s, and AM29000 made in the 80s. In 1999, AMD started their biggest series of processors yet, the Athlon series, and this was a huge success for them. AMD was even close to bypass Intel because of Athlon's performance comparing to Pentium 3 made by Intel. They also made Duron in 2000, which was a cheaper version of the Athlon. Also in 2001, they made a new version of Athlon, Athlon XP and Athlon MP. And in 2002, one of the founders, Jerry Sanders, retired. Mobile Athlon 4, Mobile Athlon XP and Mobile Duron were released in 2001 and 2002. And those were other versions of Athlon and Duron made for laptops. In 2003, they made a new version of Duron called Sempron. In the same year, Opteron was released, which was their first processor made for servers. Also, it was time to release 64-bit versions of Athlon that year. In 2005, Turion 64 was released with Turion 64 X2 in 2006. By the way, X2 means that it has 2 cores. They also made 2-core versions of Opteron and in 2007 they made Phenom, which was made for desktop computers, and it had 4 cores. Also, 2 core versions of Athlon got released, and Phenom, Athlon and Turion got to their 2nd generation in 2008. Holy cow, how many processors they made in the 2000s, but they were on the right road. In 2011, the Bulldozer series was released, and in the same year somebody overclocked Bulldozer to 8.4 freaking gigahertz, and that is a world record to this day. These days we have AMD's Zen architecture, which is used on Threadripper, Epic, and for the most popular one, Ryzen. Ryzen is the biggest success AMD has ever made, and I actually have a Ryzen on my main computer these days. I have the 2nd gen one. So yeah, that's the story of AMD. They are doing really well these days, and they have been overtaking Intel, kind of because the same reason as before. They make powerful processors which cost less, and that is a pretty good deal. Intel is doing even worse than when I made that Intel video. 11th gen of the Core series is a flop, but they also may get some light because they are going to release their graphics card series ARC in 2022. But let's see if that affects something to AMD. Nowadays, you are more likely watching this video on AMD Inside.